holiday. And really, it's not just Thanksgiving, it's every day of our lives. We stand to encounter four different parts of ourselves and also other people. And with that, y'all, it's really brought so much clarity in life as I've come to understand the different parts of us. And it's adhering to a particular therapeutic process and modality where I first learned this. And I learned this about 4 years ago when I first started therapy. I attended therapy for the first time because I really needed to grieve the loss of my brother-in-law. He was 26 years old. He and my sister had just had a sweet baby girl, and she was 3 weeks old when he was driving home from work at 4 a.m. in the morning and was killed instantly by a drunk driver who was going down the wrong side of the interstate in Houston, Texas. And I just got chills. It just, like, every time I tell this story, it's so unbelievably tragic. And the reality is each one of us has some story in our life that makes us get chills when we tell it or think about it, if we allow ourselves to feel the ramifications of it. And whether we have one bigger, smaller, you can resonate with me with losing a sibling or someone due to alcohol or addiction, whatever the case may be, but whatever the story is. I actually did not start going to therapy for about 6 years. And finally, on the 6.5 year mark, I was like, I need to go to therapy and actually work through this. And so as I started attending therapy, my therapist was specializing in something called internal family systems. And what this is a different type of practice that a therapist started a number of years ago. After meeting with hundreds and hundreds of different people, he started just hearing a consistent pattern across every single one of them. And each person that he was talking to said, like, this part of me. And then he kind of found patterns and similarities across the different parts of when people were talking about, when they were feeling afraid, what would they do? They would talk about this part of them that felt like it was trying to protect them from feeling even more pain than they were feeling in the moment. And then it just continues. There was a lot of different people that he spoke with and then came up with this type of therapy called internal family systems, based on the fact that there are four parts of you and me. There is kind of our true self, the part of us that is still untainted by the world. It's almost like pure and divine. It's how we were created at the beginning of time, and before anything came to hurt us or make us feel scared or jealous or angry, that purity of who we are is still there. So that's part number one, our true self. Part number two is our wounded self, and that part for most people was wounded in childhood, and that part first started getting afraid or fearful or small or weak or really just wounded in whatever happened, usually at like a very, very young age. And for a lot of us, we actually have a moment in time. If we were to think about what was like the first moment of pain, a lot of us have a story. A lot of us have something that happened that kind of caused this part of us to begin feeling wounded and begin feeling hurt. And I have various I think of it as capital T trauma moments and smaller T moments, like little T's. And each one of those little T moments in childhood can be contributing to this wounded self. So, for example, if you grew up and you were in a big family and never felt like you had a voice or were ever seen, those are little T moments, little trauma moments. And each one of those little T moments make up what would be your wounded self that just felt maybe not loved or not wanted. And so, sorry, my nose is dripping. I think I might be getting a cold. And so each one of those little T moments, creates effectively the wounded self, that then the third part is the protector. The protector is trying to protect the wounded part from feeling more pain, from being in a situation where they got hurt. So let's say you and I, the very first time we ever got rejected by a boy or rejected by a girl. Well, our protector part is going to try to protect us from ever feeling that kind of rejection again. So maybe we first felt rejected when we were 7 years old and we were in second grade and we tried to kiss the boy or girl we liked. And then they were like, ew, cuties or whatever. And then we're like, oh my gosh, and so horrified. Maybe that actually in adulthood, our protector part has an aversion to kissing in public or potentially being rejected. All of it, everything today in adulthood in our present ties back to roots in the past, regardless if it was a big T or little t moment. So this third part is the protector part. And the way that that manifests is actually usually through controlling or managing. It's, for example, think of it as you're in a work environment and you're the project manager and you've got to organize everything and keep them in compartments and keep them organized and keep them orderly so that nothing goes haywire. That's kind of like the role of the protector, although sometimes it can take over and be really, really controlling in not a good way. So the protector has a really important role, which is to keep us organized and systematic and operating within chaos, not in chaos, but in clarity. But just like how the wounded part, it needs to be healed, the protector part can't be the one in the driver's seat because they're going to be reactive rather than proactive. They're going to be operating off of fear to try to protect you from experiencing pain again, rather than operating in an abundance mindset that, you know what? I actually am healed and that wounded part is going to be okay. And I'm going to make a decision not because I'm afraid, but because I know that this is wise or because I actually really love this person. It's basically changing our core motivation from being one of fear to one of love. And man, when we make that shift, when all of a sudden our true self is truly in the driver's seat rather than the wounded part or the protector part, man, it makes such a difference in the way that we show up and engage with people that we love, engage with even our own selves, engage with work. And it just changes and flips everything on its head. So the true self, we want to be in the driver's seat. Now, there's one more part. There's one other part that also vies for the driver's seat. And this is what is known as the distractor, the part that is constantly trying to distract and effectively deter our distraction from being wounded, from being upset, from feeling the pain. So it's either the protector part or the distraction part that can really kind of come in and try to keep it safe. So both of them have a different way that they execute on their intent, but the intent is ultimately the same. Don't let us feel pain. And so one of the other, I guess what another way to say this, we'll just go with that. Another way to say this. We've got our protector and distractor parts that will come in and try to protect us from pain. In our nervous system, that looks like our primal brain when it starts seeing like, oh, this is a pattern. I know what this is. I've been hurt in the past when XYZ happens. Our body remembers different patterns and it remembers different experiences in the past. So then it will kind of raise a red flag and our body will start to shut down. And it will shut down by way of freezing in the moment when we feel like we can't move, by way of fighting, where all of a sudden we just get super aggressive and super angry, and we almost feel like we're not even here. Like our anger just takes over, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, even what we're saying sometimes, but we're just so angry. So freezing, fighting, fleeing, that's another kind of tactic that our body actually really, it wants to just leave the conversation, and our body really implements that to, again, protect us from feeling that pain and from experiencing what was once and what has been proven to be unsafe for us. So freezing, fighting, fleeing, getting out of that situation. And then fourth, fawning. It's like, oh, man, you are wonderful. You're so amazing. You can never hurt a fly. You look amazing today. All the fawning and praising of somebody in attempts to make them maybe not hurt us, not do the thing that we're afraid that they're going to do. Regardless of how we look at this, whether it's, okay, we've got these protective parts, whether we've got the 4 F's that can come out when we start feeling fear, either one, it's that fear is at our core, the thing making the decision. Fear is the thing at the driver's seat and at the helm of our ship. They're the thing that's guiding us forward. So the question is, how do we remove fear and replace it with love? The first step is that we have to know what it is that we're contending against. We have to know the parts of us and what they look like, what they sound like, what they feel like, so that I can say, oh, man, okay, that's my controlling part coming out. That means that I'm actually afraid. What am I afraid of? So it's recognizing the manifestation, which is control, perhaps, tracing the root down to understand why, and then really sitting with understanding it to the point that now I can re-engage. So we don't want to just sit with, oh, I'm clearly feeling afraid. Look at the manifestation of that. Here's why I'm feeling afraid. Now we want to do something about it. Now we take action. Now we see real change. Because y'all, that's the power, and that's the ultimate autonomy of knowing, is that we allow for change to occur on the other side of what we come to know. We're not stuck in this terrible cycle and in this wheel of, oh, I'm doing it again. We don't just know the problem, we also come to know the solution, and we come to know what is the thing that we can do. I love this concept of healing on our own, so that in the moment when we feel triggered, when we feel upset, when we feel so angry at someone, when we're starting to feel afraid, we know ourselves well enough, and we also know the solution well enough to then put it into practice. That doesn't mean that we always have to do it on our own. That doesn't mean that we even have to ever do it on our own. Maybe we have accountability. Maybe we actually have our best friend helping us, knowing what's going on in our lives, knowing our core fears, knowing what it is that we're trying to change. Y'all, right when I started doing this process and doing this work, I actually really confided in my mom. And I was like, Mom, I want to change. I want to be different than who it is that you're engaging with right now. And so she at one point even said to me, she was like, are you mad at me? And I was like, no, I'm actually just trying to be honest for maybe the first time in my life. And so it was really helpful, because as I was trying to change, she knew that I was trying to change too. And so what that did, that communication allowed for her to actually be a safe place for me to be messy in my attempts to change, because I don't always know. You're not going to know what's the new target. But what I do know, and what you probably know too, is that what is happening right now is not working. What is happening right now, the status quo, is not what I want. I'm not acting in accordance with who I want to be. So many times, whenever we get so angry, it's like we feel like we're not in control, and then we almost like come back to our senses, and we're like so embarrassed, and we're just hating how we acted. But we already did the damage, and we frankly don't know what else to do. I was actually talking to this little boy. He was probably 9 years old, and his parents attended the Knowing Retreat, and I worked with his mom in a one-to-one, you can call it coaching, just really helping her learn how to heal on her own. And really the goal is that she does the work. She answers her own questions, and I'm just helping be a facilitator. So it's more so facilitating than coaching, I would say. I was talking to their son, and he told me, he was like, man, I will get so angry and I cannot control myself. I cannot. And he started tearing up. He started getting upset, and he was just like, I don't know what to do. And it was just such a beautiful, so sad picture of what so many of us as adults experience. We don't know how to put it into words, this feeling of all of a sudden it's like overwhelming. All of a sudden it's like we can't breathe. All of a sudden it's like we're not in control of ourselves anymore. But what's exciting is that there is a way to catch it sooner. Like, think of it as water's rising, like water's rising at our waist. It's coming up to our elbows, and then underneath our shoulders, and then up to our neck. We don't have to wait until the water is up until our chin and it starts like getting in our mouths. We can catch it sooner if we know what it manifests as. What does it look like? So what does the behavior look like? What's the belief behind it? And what's the new target? What's the alternative? So the behavior, we talked about this a little bit already. Our parts can really take place by way of controlling or distracting. So distracting, again, a lot of times distracting is actually kind of fun. It's joking or humor or being witty. It's anything that distracts away from, oh, I'm feeling pain right now. I'm feeling fear right now. All of a sudden, this part of us kicks into gear and it's distracting and trying to make us laugh and everyone around us so that no one sees I'm in pain right now or I'm hurting right now. Anything that distracts from ultimately what is true. And then the other part is the protecting part that's really trying to keep that painful wounded part safe, but it looks like control. So it looks like actually usually not telling the truth, because once we tell the truth, well, what's going to happen? That's super vulnerable. We don't know what the other person's going to say. We don't know what they might say that might trigger even a bigger response than us. What it does is that instead of kind of putting our hands up and being like, I don't know what could happen, but I'm actually hurting right now and I could really use some love. Instead, it acts out of fear and shuts everybody out. That's what control does. And that's what that protector part does, is that it's like of the iron gate shutting and clatting everybody else out so that we never come to know anything worse than what we know now. And this is what's so interesting. Love is uncertain. We actually don't know. If we were to open ourselves up to love, we don't really know what would happen, because love manifests itself differently per person, per day, per season, per experience. Whereas fear is pretty consistent. I know that if I shut down and shut you out, you're not going to have access to me. So that's pretty reliable. Whereas love and joy and pretty much anything positive is actually relatively uncertain. We don't know how long we're going to have those positive experiences and those positive emotions. So a lot of times it's actually easier and more reliable to go into the negative, to read the bad news, to find another reason why life is so awful, rather than choosing joy. Because once we start choosing joy, once we actually start leaning into love, well, it's actually a little bit more vulnerable, because a lot of times other people can really come in and disrupt that. Or the person that we're choosing to love can end up hurting us. So there's a lot of vulnerability there. But it comes back to the question of, well, who do you want to be? Because our behaviors, our beliefs, and then the new target are all predicated in just that new target. What is the ideal? Who do you want to be? And y'all, there are people who want to be miserable. Okay, let's be honest about it though. If you want to be miserable, if you want to live in fear, if you don't want to change, you have full power and autonomy to remain as you are, but let's at least speak the truth about the fact that you're choosing this. You are not the victim in your life. You actually get to choose to be the hero. And all of us are, whether we like to admit it or not. Even if we've put someone else as the hero in our life, we still are at the end of the day. There's this beautiful concept of, strip away everybody. It's like the concept of you are born alone and you die alone. There's something really true about that. And at the same time, you're not really born alone. Your mother gave birth to you. And when you die, usually you're in relationship with other people when you die. So there's something actually really hopeful about this concept of we're so in community. But if we're choosing to live cut off from people, and we're we're choosing to be so enmeshed with them that we're putting them as the hero of our story, at the end of the day, it still remains to be true that we still have to give an account for how we lived and who we were. So there's this really beautiful dichotomy where both are true. We are in community. People are 100% in our life. And we also have full account and autonomy for who we are. We are the heroes. And we're not meant to live solely for ourselves. Living in relationship and living in community is so much more fulfilling. David Brooks authors this book called The Second Mountain. And it's this concept of growing up on the first mountain where you're the centerpiece, you're the main focus point. And then at some point, life hits you, or you come down the mountain and you realize, what am I doing all of this for anyways? It's kind of like that midlife crisis moment that a lot of folks have at 50, 60 after they've made their millions or tried and done their best. And then they realize they still come up short. And then you have the opportunity to look at the second mountain, and all of a sudden you see community is so worth living for. People are so wonderful, and I love my grandkids. And let's not wait for that moment of reckoning when we're in our 50s or 60s to realize, man, there's a different type of bank account that we can be building up, which is experiences with others. But all of that is rooted in love. So when we look at the behaviors that we exhibit, the beliefs that all of those behaviors are rooted in are the beliefs in stemming our behaviors. Are they rooted in fear or in love? Am I ultimately afraid of everyone around me hurting me? Am I afraid of what the world will do to me? Am I afraid of what I might do to myself? Because, that's at the end of the day. I was doing a workshop last week where I so appreciated someone offered something that was pretty vulnerable to say. He said, I feel like I need to be more in the limelight and speaking more and being on stages, but I'm so scared of what people will think of me. And I said, well, what do you think that they're going to do? And he was like, I think that they're going to criticize me and, effectively like point and laugh. And he was like, I'm just afraid of what they'll say. And I said, well, what will you say about you? Because y'all, at the end of the day, so often that fear that we have about what other people will think is really actually fear of what we will think of ourselves. I saw this in myself so clearly. I had a fear around showing up and doing this kind of thing, like having a conversation with people and posting on social media. And I just was so afraid of what people would think. But then I realized at the end of the day, I'm actually afraid of me. I was afraid that I would become this egotistical monster, self-absorbed, that no one would want to be friends with, and I would end up completely alone. So, for each one of us, our fear is often stemmed in something we're actually judging about ourselves. But we're pointing the finger and saying, but what about all them? Well, look at the four fingers pointing back at us, and then all of a sudden we'll realize we have way bigger responsibility in our own fear than we ever thought possible. So, in this question of what are the beliefs, we've talked about the behaviors and what they might manifest: control, distracting from the pain, and then also the core fears, or the core F's, the fear, I'm sorry, fight, freeze, flight, or fawn, either one of those. All of those behaviors are rooted in a belief. And those beliefs, if we really lean into them, oftentimes it's not just as simple as love or fear, but usually there's an actual story. There's an actual moment in our childhood or adolescence. For me, some of my core stories were developed when I was 20. If I today am being controlling and then I trace that behavior to the belief, that belief story is, well, geez, when I was 20 years old, and I'm making this up, but if there is a controlling tendency I see myself having and I trace it back to a belief, and I'm like, man, when I was 20 years old, I was planning my wedding, and I did get married at 20. I was planning my wedding, and I found that I could not rely on anyone to help me plan. And so I learned that I actually could not trust anyone other than me. That's so important because now I am going to show up in the way I run my business, show up in the way I help plan for family holidays, show up in the way I am engaged in relationships, romantically, friendships, whatever it is. I'm going to be showing up with a fundamental distrust that they will not pull their weight, and the entire success of the relationship is predicated on me. That's huge because now I'm stripping everyone not just of opportunity to contribute, but also stripping them of responsibility. So that means that they can treat me as well or as horribly as they want, because at the end of the day, it's all my fault anyways. These core beliefs are so important. We're thinking about going to Thanksgiving tomorrow. And y'all, for so many of us, we're going to be encountering behaviors of other people and also behaviors in ourselves that don't make sense, that don't add up. Why did you react that strongly when just this little thing happened? Well, it's because this little thing in the present is bringing us back to this major thing in the past that we never worked through. It's like I was talking about at the beginning, big T moments, big trauma moments are getting into a car accident or someone passing away or losing a major part of your life, whether it was your job or your house. That is a big team moment. Those are very obvious. That's when everyone's like, oh, but just be kind to Uncle Ed. He lost his job. Give him some grace. Whereas with the little T moments, Those are the moments in childhood where your dad rolled his eyes or yelled at you, or and your mom, maybe she said, "Ugh, if you don't stop crying, I'm going to give you something to cry about." Those are really impactful. And each one of those forms a story in our mind that then forms a belief that leads to behaviors in adulthood. So the present is so much tied to the past. So when we're looking at, okay, well, then this giant question of, well, who do I want to be? We first need to understand the beliefs and the behaviors of our current existing state. And then we can say, okay, so if I know that my behavior is that I tend to be more controlling, and that's rooted in the belief and in the core story that when I was getting married, no one helped me, and it's all going to be my responsibility and also my fault. All right, well, who do I want to be? How do I want to engage with other people? Is that how I want to live? And the answer is no. I do not actually want to live controlling. However, what do I stand to risk if I stop being controlling? What do I stand to gain if I stop being controlling? And it's really important to actually go through the pros and cons, go through what will happen if I stop, because it's not our it's a retraining of our nervous system at a very core level. It's not just as simple as, oh man, let me stop doing that and then we're forever changed. It's no, that's rooted in something really deep within us. That's why, the protective part and the distractor part come out, because they want to keep us from getting hurt. So what we need to do is identify, yes, a new target. So if I want to stop being controlling, maybe what that means is I am going to, maybe let's just say, man, what would I want as my alternative to control? And this is actually really helpful because I know that I actually have this tendency of being controlling. And so instead of controlling, David Hawkins wrote this book called Letting Go, and I've been reading it over the last couple of months. I kind of like eat books. It's like a meal. So I'll read like half a chapter and I'm like, oh my gosh, that was so impactful. And so as I'm thinking about kind of the new target of control, there's an element of letting go that I think is a new target, but I want to actually work on clarifying that a little bit more. Not necessarily right now, but just that's something I think over the next couple of days that I'll really be sitting with, because again, I need to replace the controlling tendency with something new. If I don't, y'all, I'm going to do a 360. I'm going to repeat old behaviors. It's like we talk about repeating history. If we don't set a new target, we will not do a 180. A 360 is doing the same thing all over again. So I need to set a new target for this desire to stop controlling. And I think that it's not just a new target in terms of behavior, but it's a new target in terms of belief as well. So we need to set a new target for both of those, because the behavior and the beliefs both need to change. So the behavior might mean that when it comes time to plan an event, I will intentionally hand over different responsibilities to different people. And the belief that needs to change is that I am actually not responsible for other people's happiness. I'm not responsible for their choices. I'm not responsible for their pain. Each one of those, responsible for their happiness, responsible for their choices, and responsible for their pain, each one of those actually have almost like a sub layer to them. Like I have a reason for why I would think each one of those. And each one took place when I was a kid. I'm one of 6 kids, and I actually was given a lot of responsibility as a child over my 2 younger sisters, and also just like keeping the family together. My parents will still introduce me in a sense of, Christene keeps the family together, and that's a lot of responsibility for a little person. So I had those narratives that the pain, joy, choices of my family were somehow dependent on me. So if I acted the right way, if I was perfect, if I performed the right way, if I was happy, I could make everybody around me happy. And so I've got to give myself new alternative narratives to those old ones. Otherwise, those are going to be coming into the driver's seat. They're going to be whispering in the back of my ear, like, the little angels on your shoulders, if I don't create a new target backed with new beliefs. So it's new behavior, new belief, and multiple of them is necessary. And then what that does is that starts to just reprogram our mind. We're operating, for all of us, on a set of programs. it's not that big of a, it's not this, sometimes it can feel really overwhelming when we want to change something. And it was helpful for me to realize, like, it's just an old program. It's just an old way of navigating the world. And oh, I want to change that navigational system. Cool. Let me put in a new one. And what that means is that I've got to identify what I want, who I want to be, and then the new behavior, new belief system that backs it up. And communicate that. Ask people for help. As I shared with my mom, as I've shared with now my partner, as I've shared with I don't know, my siblings, just letting people know. Y'all, I've even explained it to my team. I've got a branding and marketing agency for home service businesses and executives. And I've told my team internally, like, oh, I need to grow in this way. Would you help me here? Would you fill in the gap rather than me bearing the weight of doing everything on my own? So as we head into Thanksgiving tomorrow, just be watchful. We don't need to change anything magically overnight. We don't even need to change anything by Christmas, but there's some really good moments over the next 5 weeks 4 weeks really, that's going to give us good data into, all right, these are some opportunities where I can feel the distractor part of me try to be funny and distract everybody because I'm actually feeling uncomfortable or I'm feeling pain right now. So that's really good to note. Another one is watching out for the protector, where the protector just shuts down and shuts everybody out to try to keep us safe. Okay, let me pay attention. What happened before the protector took over? Why? Why are they doing that? Why are these parts coming into play? And in being curious, we also need to be grateful. Thank you for keeping me safe over these years. I'm so glad. I'm in so much gratitude for you doing that. And as we practice curiosity and gratitude regarding those old systems and current systems, they're still in place, we can slowly start to consider, okay, well, what do I want to do instead? Who do I want to be instead? If I don't want to be fearful, if I don't want to be controlling, well, then how do I want to show up? And it allows for just this curiosity and it allows for this freedom. When I realized after my marriage ended 4 years ago, I just realized, okay, I get to create something new here. My next marriage, hopefully, isn't going to look at all like my past marriage. And if I do the work and I continue to practice what I'm talking about now, it's not going to look at all like my parents, because apart from careful intention, we model what we saw and we repeat history. So we have to set new targets if we ever want to hope and see any new change in our lives. So with that, I hope you all have just a wonderful